Welcome to our hobby hangout. I'm Cathy and this is Dave. And today our sort of topic is Discworld books, specifically the kind of death sub-series of Discworld. And as ever, we will be talking about that and other things whilst doing some sort of craft. What are you doing?
What I've been doing for the last 3 weeks?
That's true. Fair enough.
I've been building Sazabi's legs. I got a little distracted last time, otherwise I could have finished the left leg. That's the left leg. Done the right leg before. It's the left leg. So I will be continuing with the legs, and possibly I might even make it to the waist unit. These things take a while. There's lots of parts. See, I told you the comments will start coming up there. This is much better than my other plan.
Sure,
Watch your list, Emmanuel.
Read them, but okay.
Yeah, I was just...
That's right.
What are you doing?
I am sewing a cow. So
As you do.
Made this cow. I made this cow during the week, and now I'm sewing on. This is part of my 12 days of Christmas thing. So this is for 8 minutes milking, because humans, I think, are probably more difficult to do than birds and animals. I'm going to have to bite the bullet on that at some point, but I was like, I don't have to actually have milk made, because who knows what those look like, and the internet's full of a lot of
interesting.
So I was like, I'll just do a nice cow, and I'll probably do some sort of pail of milk near it.
I'll describe them as interesting interpretations.
Sure. So yes, so I think the cow's come out quite well, actually. I don't know how much detail you can see, but you've got kind of its legs and its face, and then I'm going to put some decoration on it a bit later. But yeah.
This would not be a hairy cow, though. Very hairy cow.
No, it's not like one of
Not a
James's
cow.
cows.
If you want a nice wholesome content, James Oswald's Twitter feed, he quite regularly has pictures of him combing his cows. James Oswald being a crime and fantasy author of good books. So yeah, if you want some random soothing, cows, they're very fluffy and got very sharp horns by the looks of them.
That's basically how Highland cow works, yeah.
Yes, fluffy and sharp in the same, Cool. How have you been this week?
I've been alright, yeah. It's work's not quite as frantic as it has been, because a lot of the stuff that's making us frantic is kind of being resolved. It's just trying to finish stuff off now, which is a bit kind of plowing through stuff, and then there's a lot of emails, so we're just trying to work through these lot of emails and kind of waiting for what happens next, which I think is sort of us going into the office again half the time, but like people are trying to work on how that's going to be. So yeah, I'll see how I go. But yeah, still at home for most of the month. Yeah. How about you? How are you?
I'm fine. I have been in a library.
Yes, you've actually been going somewhere to do work.
Which is, ironically, I won't be next week, because currently I have no plans to be in the library next week.
It sort of seems to change short next week.
But I'm hopefully will actually be back to 3 days a week at my library, the one I'm actually paid to be responsible for, rather than the one that I kind of end up being responsible for, but only because my colleague who is only part-time, and I end up being a backstop for her. I'm a support unit. But I still enjoy working there, so, they can't get rid of me yet. I'm sure they're trying to.
Oh, sure that's not.
No, actually, it's not that I don't think they wouldn't know what to do without me, but I think I could see some things becoming a little bit more awkward if I wasn't there. But then again, if my replacement might be better. That's not good. I've gone in a very odd direction.
Theoretical, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
We'll stop this now. What have you been reading?
Okay, so it's kind of that I mentioned it last week. So I'm almost at the end of The Fated Sky by Robinette Kowal. last week I kind of only just started it, and now I think I'm a chapter or two from the end. Although, like, where's it gonna end?
In the third book?
Well, yes, presumably, but I don't have that yet.
Is
It's
it
not
published?
I'm pretty sure it is. I think I've heard people mention it.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I can't remember what the title is though. But yes, so last week I was talking about the first book. It's in the Lady Astronaut series. The first novel of which is The Calculating Stars, which, as I said last week, was about in 1952 a meteor hits the east coast of the US, devastating a lot of that, causing major problems globally. And then there is the concern that it is in fact an extinction level event due to changing the climate. And so there's sort of like people going into space, and it's from the point of view of a woman called Elmo. She's the same. It's the same first person narrative character in Fated Sky as well, in which she's kind of, after things in the first book, she's actually become an astronaut and is involved in a mission to Mars. I almost didn't say it, and I was like, I just showed them the cover and it's got a big red planet on the front, probably fairly clear as Mars.
Bit of a giveaway. I mean, I don't know how many other big red planets we might have been.
Who knows? You're better at space stuff than me. But yes, so this continues. It's interesting. So the Elma's in it. It's some years after Bruce's book, and it's about this Mars mission, which I think it's about 10 years after the beginning of the first book. And so there's some characters that are from the first book who continue on, because it's all about the people in the sort of space. It's the International Aeronautical. What's the C for centre? I have really forgotten the word. But yes, basically, so it's about that. So it's about kind of training for space stuff, and again, there's stuff about Elma's life and her personality, her religion, her mental health, the fact that she is sort of a minority and that she's Jewish, but also that there are a lot of sort of people, astronauts and people in the organisation who are black, and it's like 60s, or it's alternate 60s America, but it's still 60s America, so it's sort of the thing. And then there's also stuff dealing with people who are against the space program and are taking opportunities. Well, there's some stuff that's opportunistic and some stuff that's quite planned to try and disrupt, humans going into space. Because they say there are more problems on Earth and those should be dealt with. And and again, this one's kind of more. It's a bit more of a tight kind of thing where you've got like a crews and people working together and sort of how the personalities mesh, and also stuff to do with how people are selected for the missions, what duties people get in space, does that conform to stereotypes people have about types of people and stuff. And also just space is a hostile environment, and yes, obviously working through that. So yes, it's good. I mean, I'm really enjoying them, and the first book and this one, which I've got through reasonably quickly. I mean, it's only been a week, but I've been busy. I've been working, but it's very good. Again, it's very well written. Character stuff's very strong. What goes on, like, there's a lot of stuff where there's people who perhaps don't get along, but it sort of says in some respects it might want to be better with people who you don't get along with massively, because then you're not focusing on being matey, you're kind of getting the job done, you're more efficient. But then also, if you're living in confined quarters with people, is it better if things are harmonious? And various sort of interpersonal things. There's a bit more of that in there, and also a lot of very specific details about living in space. And I know that the author spoke to, and I think made friends with a lot of astronauts for that. So one or two things that I'd sort of read about in other sources about how it affects you, then there's just sort of stuff I hadn't thought of, but I'm sure it's all very meticulously researched. So yeah, it's quite interesting. There's also some mathsy stuff in, but you can kind of, because Elma's like a maths whiz, but you can it's sort of there, but it's not loads and loads of detail, but it kind of adds the character stuff. Cool. So yeah.
I am currently reading a book I didn't bring downstairs because I'm not going to talk about it because I'm still reading it. But it is The Silver Tide by Jen Williams, which is the third book in the Winnowing... No,
it's
Coppercat. Coppercat's Winnowing Flames, the other one. Coppercat trilogy. So next time I'll most likely be talking about that because I've actually finished and then try not to give too many spoilers.
I'll have to actually tell Jen, but yeah.
What I'll actually briefly mention, because in between, I quickly read Only You Can Save Mankind by Terry Pratchett. This was before we decided to do Pratchett as a topic, so...
Well, we vaguely talked about it, but yeah.
Mainly because I wanted something short and easy to read. Turns out on a reread, when you're a bit older, it's got a lot more depth than you actually think.
That's kind of how Pratchett works. So you read this as a teenager, like, oh, this was fun, had some funny bits and it was interesting, and then you read it, or just quotes people put on the internet later, and like, oh, there was a lot of this.
So it's basically kind of similar to the plot of The Last Starfighter. Boy...
I've not seen that. Read that?
Seen it as a film.
Okay, I thought it was a film.
We're going to have to work on that one, obviously. So Boy, I can't even remember his name. Johnny?
But if it's the same as Johnny and the Dead and Johnny and the Bomb.
Yes.
So I've only read Johnny and the Dead.
Yes, it is Johnny.
Yeah.
Yes.
Johnny and the Bomb.
So he gets... he's playing a computer game when he basically gets the alien fleet that he's fighting surrenders to him. And it turns out that they are real. Well, they think they're real. And it's all very interesting because he's playing with, obviously, in some respects, is Johnny actually, is this real or is he hallucinating it? Because he's currently going through some trying times with his parents divorcing, or at least having some serious marital issues. And obviously it's spilling over into his life, and you do, for a lot of it, you can actually read it as, is this really happening to him, or is this just a method of coping with the trying times?
Is this a metaphor?
Yes. I mean, later on he kind of breaks that, but for a lot of it you can kind of go through it and wonder, actually no, is it real or isn't it? And it's a good fun little story. I'd say got a bit more depth than I remember it having, but then again I read it a long time ago. So
is The Last Starfighter one of these 80s ones that people reference quite a bit but haven't seen?
Not as much as there, but it's basically Boy gets very good at a arcade game, and then aliens come down and abduct him so that he can basically use the Starfighter in the computer game to fight off their enemies.
Okay. Actually, thinking about it, you say that and it sort of sounds familiar to the thing, but I can't remember any lines or quotes or images from it, which suggests it's probably not referenced as much as I guess its contemporaries. Which, even if I've not seen, I've seen these.
No, it's not one that I think is what. Yeah, it's not one of the classic 80s science fiction.
Like classic adjacent or something.
Yeah, it's there. Sure. But it's, although I'm going to tangent very briefly. Mm-hmm. Not quite. It's 80s science fiction. It's 80s. The trailer for the new Dune movie has come out.
Oh yeah, people keep talking about that.
Go and watch it. It's very good. And then we might have to mutter about when actually we're going to be able to see it, but
Okay. I've just seen people saying they've seen it. I've not felt like watching it myself.
It invokes the David Lynch movie.
Yes. Okay.
But it also seems to be doing its own thing, and
sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in seeing it. I just hope that I might be able to see it in the cinema, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that one.
In fairness, even before the pandemic, we only saw some things in the cinema.
Yes.
It's like we have a kid, so.
Yes, but this is one of those ones that really should be seen in cinema, I think.
Okay, sure.
It's just huge, and obviously I mean, okay, there shouldn't be any plot spoilers out there for it because if you've read the book, you know what the. But Not
if you haven't read the book, then if it's anything like the other film, Princess Exposition will just explain things at the beginning, which is one of the few things I remember from when you showed me the film.
Yeah. What was I going to say?
Sorry.
But yes, the director did Arrival, which was very good as well.
Oh yeah, that was good. Okay, yeah, okay. I don't know that's involved. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Arrival was good.
Manon, I told you, I watched the trailer for the Batman when it came out on my phone, and I explicitly told you I had, and then I'd need to watch it on a computer screen. And then on Thursday, while flying during Flight Point, I again told you I'd watched it. I'm not the problem here.
Well, that was a weird interlude.
That would be my brother and his other half that is not watching it. I believe also, though, I stepped away from the keyboard after watching it, so I might have missed a few things there. But I have watched it twice now, and once previous to you telling me to watch it. So there we go. That's me.
Is that the Robin Pattinson thing?
Yes.
Again, I saw people talk about it on the internet, but didn't quite feel bothered to actually watch it.
I wasn't that impressed.
You know there's audio on this.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, Mano.
I've watched the Bill and Ted trailer. No, wait, I watched the shorter Bill and Ted trailer. I don't think I've seen the longer one, but I was going to watch that at some point.
That's fair enough.
So in our unexpected roundup of the trailers,
yeah.
Which I guess is a thing that we do in this episode.
Sorry, as it was out and... Sorry, yes, it got me unexpectedly rolled up because I had already... I'm not going to let it get to me. Not going to let it get to me.
Okay, fine, that's good to know.
Man, we can have a chat about this later.
Okay. Shall we...
We might actually start on the actual topic, yes. While I fight with this.
I have been more prepared this time because work is somewhat less knackering. Because it's September now. I know it was September last time, but August was basically 6 weeks or something. It's been almost the longest month of this year besides March. Was it March? Yes, March. It was the very long and weird one. Anyway, who even knows what time it is? It's 2020. So, we are talking about the Discworld sub-series, which is known as the Death series. So Discworld books were written by Sir Terry Pratchett over quite a number of years, and very good. So there's 41 novels, I think it is. I just checked that earlier, and I think it said about that. And all set on the Discworld, which I'm sure most people watching will know, but it's basically a big world in which there's a giant turtle that flies through space called Greater Tuin. On his back is 4 elephants, whose names I don't recall in their entirety. And on top of that, there is a disc that is a world. And it's improbable and magical. And the books are all pretty good to basically really good. So the Death sub-series is about, Death. It's about the Grim Reaper, known as Death, who basically appears in every Discworld book.
Yes.
Because anytime a character dies, he appears. And then there's a sub-series within, because the Discworld novels tend to have reoccurring characters, or groups of characters that tend to expand a bit over time.
Yeah.
We'll sort of talk about this with the Death ones. And so they kind of get their own sort of sub-series within it, although as the books go on, there's more paths crossing, and as you said, Death appears in every single book, because he's there every time somebody dies to kind of take them across to the other side.
Saying that, I don't think if someone dies in every single book, I think he just turns up occasionally just because.
Well, I'm sure somebody does die in every single Discworld book, but maybe we don't see Death talk to each and every one of them.
No, I don't.
You know, but yeah, yes. Anyway, so there are 5 books in the sort of Death sub-series. So they start with Mort, which it's the 4th one. It was published in 1987. This is the first one. So Death had appeared in the previous 3 books as sort of like the Grim Reaper character. I think he'd been a bit of a jerky to Rincewind. Not that Rincewind is particularly likeable.
Wasn't that because they summoned him?
Yes, I think the wizard summoned him as well.
So
yeah,
fair dues on that one. You kind of
well,
just get...
I think he also I think he's a slightly more malicious character right at the beginning because he's like,
Not surprising,
that's what Rincewind's always running from.
Yeah.
So he's sort of a little bit antagonistic. And it's sort of like, because at one point Rincewind turns up in his kingdom, doesn't he? Because then you briefly get war, and then you meet Isabel. Anyway, briefly. But so it kind of expands on that. Basically, it's about a boy called Mort, who's not very good at working on the farm. So his father takes him to an apprentice fair, where he gets apprenticed just before midnight to Death, who Mort can see, but his father seems to think he's been apprenticed to an undertaker. And then Mort is taken to Death's kingdom, which everything is black. But otherwise it's kind of like a slightly fancy house. And I think the point's made that you'd think Death's house would be full of, funereal, graveyardy things. But Death doesn't actually see that stuff, because people don't usually die in that. That's what happens later. And what Death tends to see is the insides of people's homes, and various other places like that. So in the course of this book, Mort meets Isabel, who is Death's adopted daughter, who has been 16 for a long time. He also meets Death's manservant, called Albert, who it turns out is an old wizard, who tried to avoid Death, but accidentally got his spell wrong and ended up being at his side. But he's only got a little bit of life left, so he has to stay by Death in order to keep existing. There's also Death's horse, Binky, who is pure white and is just kind of a lovely horse that can also carry the souls of the dead. So Mort kind of becomes part of the household. He's taken out with Death to kind of do his duties. He tries to stop an assassination and is told not to. And then later, when a princess is going to be assassinated, he saves her and kills the assassin, which isn't what he's supposed to do, because he's not supposed to interfere in deaths. He's supposed to just take the souls that are killed and not get involved in events. And that kind of creates a bit of a bubble of paradox where, this woman's alive inside the bubble but not outside the bubble because she was supposed to die. And then there's a lot of investigating things. They meet a wizard. Do they meet the raven at that point? I think so. There's a talking raven. Although I don't think he gets named until later books. Then basically it seems a bit like Mort becomes more and more like the personality of Death. So he starts being able to, because Death isn't invisible, but people don't see him unless they're trained like witches and wizards, because it's almost too impossible, so the minds bounce off it. But he can do stuff like walk through walls, because he's in solid, but because he's more real than the walls are, because nothing's more real than Death, the finality of it. So yeah, Mort starts doing that, and then Death himself kind of goes on a little bit of a holiday and starts experiencing a load of mortal stuff, like dancing and gambling and getting a job. And then yes, but various things happen. There's a bit of a confrontation, and then turns out that Death's daughter Isabel, it's kind of spelt with a Y at the beginning. Her and Mort have fallen in love, kind of a little bit unexpectedly. Except, was it unexpected, or is that what he got an apprentice for? And Death, who probably should have, punished Mort, kind of lets him go for reasons that become clear later. Yes. And then the next book is Reaper Man.
Yes.
You can do that one.
Oh, yes.
So Reaper Man is the 11th Discworld novel, and it was published in 1991.
I read the first chapter of this as part of World Book Night. That recording's not online. But I can make it available if anyone wants to hear me read the first chapter of... I say first chapter, there's not really chapters.
Yeah, it's a Pratchett book.
So the Reaper Man is... They kind of... The death sequence, they go into the more of the metaphysical aspects of the Discworld. So you get introduced to the auditors of reality, who are there to make sure things happen correctly, and their view of what happens correctly doesn't always agree with what is actually happening, and they decide that Death basically he's got too much of a personality. Because he's the anthropomorphic personification of death.
I mean, that's the word we haven't used. Anthropomorphic personification. Everyone tries to explain what he is.
He's getting more and more human because that's his nature, because he's so close to humanity. So they decide to retire him, and this is kind of a bit of a fight between Death and auditors. But he goes off and basically works on a farm, who turns out to be really, really good at bringing the harvest in.
Oh yes, I suppose we should have said, like, the Grim Reaper thing, he's basically a skeleton in black robes with a scythe.
Yeah.
And, like, glowing blue eyes.
I mean, one of the key points in this is that they kind of split Death off into different personifications, and one of the ones that runs, you see from this one onwards, is the Death of Rats. It's kind of cute, being a skeletal rat in a cloak and a scythe.
Tiny scythe.
Tiny scythe. So it's a Death kind of almost learns to be more human, and then fights for his job back. It's quite good. But this was the first Discworld book I ever read. Not literally this copy, but might have been. Might have been. But yes, that one's. So again, it's about sort of Death being human, which is kind of like what's the.
Well, it kind of builds on what happens in Mort. Mort, it's just like a bit partway through the story.
But he's become more human, and it's been a while since I've read this, so I really should go back and read it. I've got
there's
too
that
many
lady
books to
he
read.
works for,
Yes.
isn't there? And there's also all those people that don't die, like the wizard, and then that's where Red Shoe comes from.
Yes. Yeah, you obviously can remember this better.
I just remember those bits. It's the stuff with the trolley and the cities.
Yes, they are the cities. Yes, because there's too much life around. Because Death isn't doing his job.
That's it. So it starts as snow globes, and then it turns into trolleys, and then it turns into a city.
Yeah, but they're not. Yeah, they're strange cities because they're magic.
Aren't they kind of shopping malls when no one has that word?
Yes,
in
yeah, they
it
are.
Starts as a shopping trolley.
Yeah, they become these giant shopping malls of oddness. Yes, because there's too much life. So eventually, yes.
But I think that's what introduces a lot of the undead characters to it later, isn't it? Particularly.
I think that Red Shoe and the sort of
Mrs. Cake or something.
Yes, Mrs. Cake. With her Indian spirit guide.
Oh, I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, it's a little insensitive.
Yeah. It's good omens are all like that too. Which is I suppose they're not using Indian, they use some sort of Discworld version of it, but like you can tell.
He's two dogs bucket, isn't he?
I don't remember that bit. I don't remember bits and pieces of it.
He's two dogs bucket, because his tribe had a tradition that they named the children after the first thing the mother sees out.
Oh, yeah, well, I've heard of that before in general things. I have no idea how true it is. It does sound like the kind of thing you'd be a bit wary of.
And yes, he's two dogs bucket. And
when asked, a sibling that's called.
Yes, is his twin brother who was first. Has got a less good name. I'll let you work out that one for yourself.
What the two dogs are doing. Okay.
Yes. Anyway, sure. so yes, Reaper Man, good book.
Okay. So the next one was Soul Music, which I put cow over my notes. Soul Music, which is the 16th Discworld novel and came out in 1994. So this one introduces Death's granddaughter Susan. So it starts off with Susan's in a boarding school and she's a very sensible girl who has some slightly odd abilities, and she doesn't remember anything about who her grandfather is, but her parents were killed in a carriage accident. And she's at this book. I think is she a duchess or something? I think she's Duchess of Stow Heelot, which has something to do with what happened in Mort. I mean, basically, Reaper Man's between Mort and Soul Music, but Soul Music is the sequel to Mort, because basically Susan is the daughter of Mort and Isabel. And in fact, at one point, there's one bit in Mort where there's kind of confrontation and Death does something and you're not sure why, and then Soul Music kind of explains it. But the stuff like Susan has dim memories of visiting her grandfather in a dark house and like playing the xylophone, but like on him or something. And she sort of starts waking up to these more and more, and her parents die, and she starts figuring out what's happened. And then there's the other part of the plot is about the music. So a guy from from Llamados, which is basically Discworld Wales, likes to play the harp, and he goes to Ankh-Morpork to be a musician because he doesn't want to be a druid, but his harp gets broken, and then he buys a guitar from one of those weird little shops that isn't there the next day.
Which is always a bad sign.
On Discord, certainly. And then he meets up with a dwarf who plays the horn and a troll that plays rocks. And they can't pay the fees for the Musicians Guild, so then they just come up with their own music, and the guitar kind of seems to get this young man sort of, doing stuff, and they make what they call music with rocks in it. And then it's a little like, I guess, Moving Pictures, or The Truth, I guess. It was something from our world, sort of like, is in the Discworld, and particularly Ankh-Morpork, and it goes a bit strange, and then the wizards get carried away. So what happens is everyone starts getting really into music with rocks, in it. The lad, whose name is Imp Ikellen, changed his name because it means, like, Bud of the Holly, so he changes his name to Buddy. Obviously where that's going. And it's basically kind of about this idea that the music, in the beginning there was the beats, and it was 1, 2, 1, 2.
Check 1, 2, check
yeah.
1, 2.
And so the music is kind of using Buddy, as he becomes known, as like an avatar. So he's just interested in like playing the music, and like his bandmates are concerned for him because he almost doesn't seem to exist the rest of the time. Meanwhile, Susan sees him and sort of gets interested and is also discovering her own heritage because did Death go missing or something for a little bit? She kind of gets...
Death gets drawn into the music because he's on the motorbike. He's on the motorbike with the Dean's leather jacket. Yeah, isn't that towards the end though? I thought there was a thing at the end. So yes, there's a cool bit with the skeleton on the motorbike. So that's obviously fun. But yes, so Susan's trying to help Buddy, and he's kind of consumed by the music, and then the Musicians Guild are after them because they never pay their dues. And then, they like play the mended drum, and then they can do bigger and bigger venues. And then the wizards get all worked up because they're very sensitive to like weird vibrations of things coming through from other realities. So in the university, the wizards, who are the faculty, are basically behaving like sort of teenagers, and they're wearing leather robes and putting studs in the back of them that spell things out, like live fats die yoga nu, stuff like this. And everyone wants to buy a guitar, and there's always bands playing, and the idea is that somebody should become inspire all these fans as like kind of like Beatlemania or Elvis Presley stuff, and then the idea is that then the musician who's the avatar of this dies young in a tragic accident. But it's kind of say, but so the stuff with that, so it's kind of Susan discovering her heritage. Because first she wants to be very sensible and logical, and obviously you can't have a horse. Well, you can't have like a skeleton that takes lives, and she kind of basically Binky comes through, and then Binky's the one thing she remembers. Like she's quite annoyed that all this weird supernatural stuff has interrupted her education, but then she meets Binky, and he's this lovely, lovely horse, and she's like, "Oh, I do remember Binky," and she gets taken to Death's house, and she's sort of supposed to be reaping, like she's supposed to take Buddy, and then doesn't, and then that kind of I think allows the music to get in because he's kind of living on borrowed time. So instead of having regular sand in his hourglass, he has the music. So yeah, again, it's kind of getting it all sorted, and there's just a lot of references to, I guess, sort of classic rock and roll stuff and things. Yeah. There's also an animated version of it, but we could talk about that later. If we have time. Okay. You want to do the next one? Yes. This one I actually have read more recently. So this is Hogfather. Which number is this then?
Oh, Hogfather is the 20th Discworld novel, and it was published in 1996.
I have read this one semi-regularly at Christmas. It is a classic Christmas story.
It's the Discworld Christmas novel.
It's the Christmas novel.
There's no Christianity.
So the Hogfather is the disc's equivalent of Father Christmas. And this delves into, again, more of some of the, again, metaphysics of this world. And mythology. So, in this, the Tooth Fairy goes missing. And in this, the Tooth Fairy is a franchise operation.
So a Tooth Fairy goes missing.
A Tooth Fairy goes missing. And Susan is kind of dragged back into everything when Death has to take on the role of the Hogfather.
Because he went missing before the Tooth Fairy.
Yes, the Hogfather went. So the Hogfather is your cross between Father Christmas and a pagan renewal god.
Well, it's kind of exploring the whole sort of like Christianity to grow from paganism. So like it was new jobs for old gods. So it's like you used to be about like hunting a boar in the snow to make sure that the year would cut, that the sun would come again. And now it's about a jolly old man in a sleigh pulled by pigs who gives out presents to children. And it's sort of like, about the mythic stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, so in this, so for part of this, you have Death going around being Father Christmas, which has a great sequence in a superstore, department store, a children's department store, where he's basically sitting there and children are coming up and are telling him what they want for Christmas. And
Hogswatch. It's called Hogswatch.
Yeah. So, can I quickly find that?
I think if you're going to quote anything, you need to have prepared this beforehand.
But I never prepared, darling. I never, even for my live streams when I was doing it for work, I never prepared.
Okay, that was just, I guess, reading stuff. You already had the book.
True, yes. It's great radio.
Okay, yeah.
Man flicks through books.
So, and basically there's other stuff. So, again, the Auditors of Reality involved. There's a weird guy from the Assassin's Guild who's a little bit too weird even for the Ankh-Morpork Assassin's Guild. The wizards, again, seem to be doing their stuff. That's where Hex gets introduced, who is the computer that gets built by some of the more sciencey, techie wizards. There's a lot of, I suppose like in Reefman there was a lot of life around. In Hogfather there's a lot of belief around. Yeah, so lots of things that people kind of mention as believing in suddenly appear, and it's all a bit weird. So like, somebody goes, if there's a god of wine, there must be the god of hangovers. And then there's a god of hangovers. He has a bad time of things. Yes. Stuff like that.
I found my piece now.
Sure.
So yes, so Death is sitting with a young girl on his lap, going, it's like what do you want for Hogswatch? Death talks in capital letters. It's difficult to do in a. The Hogfather said the Hogfather hurriedly. Mother took her economic cue again and said briskly, "She wants a." The Hogfather snapped his fingers impatiently. The mother's mouth slammed shut. The child seemed to sense that there was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and spoke quickly. "I want an army. And a big castle with pointy bits," said the child. "And a sword." "What did you say?" prompted the Hogfather. "A big sword," said the child, after a pause for a deep cognition. "That's right." Uncle Heavy nudged the Hogfather. "You're supposed to say thank you," he said. "Are you sure? People don't normally." "I meant they thanked the Hogfather," Albert hissed. "Which is you, right?" "Yes, of course. Ahem. You're supposed to say thank you." "Thank you." "And be good. This is part of the arrangement." "Yes." "Then we have a contract." The Hogfather reached into his sack and produced a very large model castle with, as correctly interpreted, pointy blue cone roofs on turrets suitable for a princess to be locked in, a box of several hundred assorted knights and warriors, and a sword. It was 4 foot long and glinted along the blade. The mother took a deep breath. "You can't give her that," she screamed. "It's not safe." "It's a sword," said the Hogfather. They're not meant to be safe." "She's a child," shouted Crumley. "It's educational." "What if she cuts herself?" "That will be an important lesson." Uncle Heavy whispered urgently. "Really? Oh well. It's not for me to argue, I suppose." The blade went wooden.
Yeah, so it's kind of a bit, I suppose, the closest thing is Nightmare Before Christmas. You've got somebody who's normally involved in death, being Santa.
Yes,
but he's like trying harder. It's not.
He basically has to sort of burden the belief in the Hogfather has to be there.
Yeah, he has to keep it going. There's lots about children in it, like what children believe, and the fact that children are so full of belief, which is a big part of kind of like the wider plot. And then Susan at this point is being a governess to some children, and she's a very good governess, because anytime the children are afraid there's monsters under the bed, she doesn't tell them, oh, it's fine, monsters don't exist. She gets a poker, and she shows them that you can slay monsters, or at least whack them massive around the head with a poker, and then all the monsters know not to go near that house. So Susan at first is like really angry that her grandfather pretended to be the Hogfather, but then he kind of has to get her involved because Susan is human, or mostly human, and so there's things she can do and places she can go, because that has the one place that death can't go, which is a child's place in the Discworld. So, but yeah, it's quite interesting, because there's a lot of bits and pieces about, as we said, mythology stuff. There's a lot of stuff about like Christmassy things.
Yeah, it's a very it is quite a nice one to read at Christmas, because it feels Christmassy, but
it's also Discworld.
It's Discworld, yes. It is and it isn't.
Yeah. Also, I suppose we say Christmas, obviously that's the thing it's based off, because it's not very British, but it's kind of like winter Renus as well. But yeah, the auditors are involved, unsurprisingly.
Sky did a reasonable adaptation of it.
Yeah, I thought it was right.
I mean, let's be honest, with doing any of these fantasy adaptations, it's always going to be awkward to... and they did not too bad a job of it.
Mark Warren was in it, showing yet another one of the various kinds of menacing he can do.
Yes.
The interesting thing about Mark Warren as an actor is that the first thing I saw him, he was kind of like cheeky, chappy sort of bloke, and then I've just seen like several different things where he plays the most menacing character, and it's always a different kind of menacing, and there's very few menacing types that Mark Warren can't do, apparently. It's just good acting, basically. Yes, so then the sort of final one in the Death sub-series is Thief of Time, which is the 26th Discworld book and was published in 2001. So Thief of Time, again, it's got Susan in it. In this, Susan's actually a school teacher now. She has a class of kids, and she takes them on all these. She has lots of very fun, inventive lessons where they sort of go to all sorts of places, and the school's like, oh, it must have been their imagination, and then it's her kind of like stopping the school from realising she's actually using her powers to make the education better. It's sort of about a couple of guys who are orphans. So there's Jeremy and Lobsang. Lobsang was a thief in Ankh-Morpork, but then he was found by the monks of history. So this sort of brings in the monks of history, although they've been mentioned bits and pieces before. Yeah. The history monks, that's it, basically live in a valley. It's kind of Shangri-La, and it's kind of that Tibetan, but not presumably real Tibet, but kind of like the fictional like idea of Tibet that we have from like, you know, many films. Not that deeply accurate, but this idea of like kind of like pseudo-Buddhist monk types who, you know, can do martial arts but are also very peaceful and stuff. And it's sort of about time, well, Thief of Time, so sort of thing. So again, another anthropomorphic personification, who had family, and that comes into a bit. So there's that. So this guy called Lobsang's being trained by the monk who... Is it Lousy?
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it, and in fairness, the name's probably a joke. So, but yeah, so Lousy is basically this little, skinny, bold, old monk who sweeps. He's called the Sweeper, and his job is just to sweep things. But everyone's afraid of him, including the abbot. The abbot having been reincarnated multiple times, and is clearly the Dalai Lama version of Discworld. So again, it's quite tropey, but the whole point of Discworld is it's quite tropey. It's just, I suppose, when it's stuff that's not like Western tropes, you're always a bit like, oh, this is hopefully okay. But yeah, so as that Lobsang turns out to be really skilled at doing time stuff. And the regular sort of people in the monastery can't control him, so he gets given to the Sweeper as an apprentice, and then they end up going to Ankh-Morpork, because in Ankh-Morpork there's a clockmaker called Jeremy. Jeremy likes things to be very precise. It is Jeremy, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. He likes things to be very precise and accurate, and he makes clocks. They're the most accurate clocks, and then he is hired by a lady to make the most accurate clock in existence, the glass clock. And basically it turned out this is a thing that happened before, but no one remembers, because the monks of history kind of mess with stuff. There's also stuff to do with death, and also some of his former mates, in that there is stuff to do with the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and then some, and then Susan gets involved in it, and Death kind of gets Susan to be involved because again, it's someone like her. There's stuff to do with someone. There's kind of a bit of a chosen one type thing happening here, and Susan thought, well, there's someone else who again is mostly human, who has inherited some weird anthropomorphic family traits, sort of thing. So it's kind of this, I say race against time, then time stops. But that doesn't affect some individuals on Discworld. So then it's, and the auditors are involved. And again, there's a certain amount of exploration of humanity, but not from Death this time, from a being who kind of technically didn't really have an existence, then is given an existence and a human body, and how that affects somebody who's kind of before only been almost a theoretical construct, who then becomes a person, and what senses and experience and being an individual rather than part of a collective entity does to you, or does to an individual. And there's also quite a bit of stuff about chocolate.
Yes, there is quite a bit about chocolate.
And it's interesting because it's one of these ones, it explains a lot of weird stuff in the Discworld, because it sort of goes, well, don't you think it's weird that, like, this thing seems medieval and this thing seems quite early modern or so? And they don't quite say it like that. They'll be like, oh, well, there's this crappy little theatre here and then there's this big fancy opera house, but they're there at the same time. Yeah, that's because we had to repair history once already. So it's just like anything in Discworld seems anachronistic. You're like, this is why. So it's kind of a good, smart get-out. It's also a good story, but, yeah. As with the season books, there's a certain amount of, like, Susan is there, and she, her regular life is interrupted by something supernatural, and she's best placed to deal with it, but Death doesn't tell her exactly, because he knows she's more likely to go into things out of being a bit defiant. And there's sort of this sense that there might be a bit of a romance there, but it doesn't quite become clear, and, like, usually Susan's just shoving away, the death of rats when he comes to visit with the Raven, who I think by this point is called Quoth, as in Quoth the Raven. But yes, so, it's the sort of usual cycle of Susan sort of being a bit resistant to her heritage and then getting involved because she kind of has to and because the situation demands it. But then a lot of stuff happening with other people as well. Yeah. Nanny Ogg from the Witch series makes she makes a few cameos in it sort of over time. Yeah, it's quite good, but I think the thing with the Susan books is that it's not usually Susan who's she's in them and she's a fun character, and because she's very sensible but also can walk through walls and occasionally compel people to do things.
Useful.
Yes. It's sort of about other people though. Most Susan books are about what's happening with other people, and there's quite often like a bloke who has something a little bit odd about him, but then it doesn't quite seem to work out exactly, although it's kind of this one's hinted a bit more between her and Lobsang, but we didn't get another Susan book, did we? So,
no,
so we don't really know. It kind of ends with him sort of visiting her, but yes,
it's I think one of the many unfortunate things with Terry Pratchett's early demise. That came out not quite as I wanted, but anyway, was that was that obviously we didn't get another Susan books, I think, because he went on and explored a lot of the other.
Well, I think this one was 2001.
And we, so.
But yeah, it's I mean they are good. Susan is a good character, and I have dressed up as Halloween once when I was a teenager. But I even got a small plastic scythe. But yeah, it's sort of like I think Death's the more compelling character. But again, I don't think he could keep doing. Death explores a different part of humanity, so it kind of went on to other stuff. Not. So it's like so the Hogfather is Death exploring being a different kind of anthropomorphic personification to what he usually is. I must admit, I think the Thief of Time doesn't have Death in as much. It's more to do with the Horsemen. So there's stuff about there's the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse and the one that left before they became famous, which is presumably a reference to that bloke or blokes from the
Beatles, yeah.
But yes, so then there's sort of stuff about that, and like if the world is ending, are they involved and stuff? So it's kind of, I think that's more Death's part, and again, sort of saying season on track, but again, it's kind of about the monks of history and stuff. So it sort of combines a few different things that again show up in later novels. And I think actually after Thief of Time, there was Last Hero and the Amazing Morrison's Educated Rodents, which are less because one's like a graphic novel and one was like a kid a YA book. And then after that was Night Watch, which obviously is very monks of history, very history monks. So kind of, I think it just introduced a new element that kind of explains some stuff that already happened. Because isn't the Sweeper in Small Gods?
Possibly. I own Small Gods is one of the ones I haven't read as much.
No, I've not read so much either. I feel like he turned up and then it wasn't there for ages and then turned up again. But kind of the point of the character is he can just turn up anywhere, anytime. Yeah. So, but yeah, so yes.
If you had to pick a favourite,
we're between Hogfather and Thief of Time.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
I think the early ones, are good, but they're kind of setting up the characters for.
Yeah.
So the characters are more interesting in the later ones.
I think that's true of a lot of
True, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's true of a lot of Pratchett. The point is Pratchett is very good at developing characters, a lot of the characters. So yeah, I mean, Mort I think was the first one where he kind of broke out of like, I'm going to take a fantasy trope or a load of fantasy tropes and just sort of do a thing of them.
Yes.
Because I don't remember much about Equal Rights, if I'm honest. But that I think was basically, what if a wizard was a girl and stuff. Whereas Mort's a bit more like different. It's like, what if Death was like trying to be a person a bit, which is kind of the two books almost. Yeah, Hogfather, as you say, it's when you read around Christmas. It's got a lot of mythic stuff in, which I quite like. You know, there's fun, weird stuff that the wizards are in it, but only a bit, and they need to just sort of be there to be like weird old blokes.
Explain a few things. Like they're usually there to tell you what's going on.
But they don't tell you. They just have long, argumentative conversations, and somebody's sort of half the sides. But a computer, the first computer on the disc, gets a Christmas present, a Hogwatch present. But yeah, so Hogfather. I mean, I did like some. I mean, Soul Music. I actually had. There's an animated version of it, which I can't remember when that came out, but I had it on VHS. I can't even remember how I got that. I don't think it was like HMV or anything. I think I had to order it.
Yeah,
but like at the point when you cut things out and get your parents to fill on a slip and send away for something. Like not on the, I mean it's VHS, obviously not on the internet. But I had that. It was a two VHS one you put in, and also there was a section that had an interview with Terry Pratchett. We talked about it and stuff. So stuff like the dwarf character who is he called Glod? I think being Liverpudlian, obviously Imp is Welsh. Just bits of the animation and stuff there. So that one's I kind of know reasonably well, but kind of from the animated version. But that was quite fun. But that was in that, and also in the Weird Sisters animated one, which I haven't seen. Death's voiced by Christopher Lee.
Yes.
And then Christopher Lee didn't voice him in the Hogfather because he was voiced by Ian Richardson. But then when Death appears in Colour of Magic, he's voiced by Lee again because Richardson died.
Fair enough.
Yes. Yeah. So, how do you have it? Was yours just the same?
I'd say, yeah. I think Hogfather's the one I've read the most.
Yeah.
But I think the second to that is actually Thief of Time. I think I've read that.
I can't quite decide, because Thief of Time, I say, it's less about death, and Susan's in it, but kind of in the same way as well, even I think less than the Hogfather, but the stuff with, the way it takes the idea of, like, the Chosen One, and twists it, and I'm not going to say in case anyone's not read it, but let's just say that sometimes I watch the videos that Mark Ashiro does. When he did Thief of Time, he kept like speculating on the identity of the Chosen One, and when the reveal comes, he was so like because not quite the same, but in a similar sort of family.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was probably a bit too cryptic, but it takes this kind of like pseudo-Tibetan Buddhist martial artsy thing. Has a character who's very pragmatic who talks about his way and just says a lot of things an old lady would say, as though they're very wise teachings. But old ladies are quite wise sometimes, probably more than we'd realise. There's the whole idea of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse and that like the guy that left the band and stuff, which I think because of all the Good Omens at that point it was kind of an interesting take on it in a different way, because War kind of appears I think in one of the early discs, like
I think that she does
the second one, Fantastic I think, and also the whole thing with, because the auditors are in it, and again the auditors just want everything to be rocks going in straight lines or in nice neat curves, and that's all they want. So life is messy and weird, and they don't like it. And so if time stops, everything will be still, and then everything can be orderly. And it shows all these creatures who become embodied and try to navigate a world where you're inside a head attached to a body, where you're like a mind in a body rather than just
a floating consciousness.
Part of a floating hive of consciousness, a collective consciousness. And there's just all this weird stuff they do, and then there's all these logic problems that trap them, like a thing that points. Yes, so I see no dad, or like left, or I don't know if I did that right.
No, you didn't. Well, you didn't, but you might have been correct for the camera.
Yeah, it depends where you're looking, but like signs. They get confused by signs and stuff, and
it points right and says left.
Yeah, like the idea that you've got, the first one of them becomes intoxicated by life, and stuff. So yeah, I think they've both just got a lot of really strong themes, and it's not kind of like, soul music's kind of, again, it's a little bit like moving pictures or something. It's a bit like, we're going to do rock and roll now. And there's lots of interesting stuff in it. It's like, this is rock and roll. Whereas Hogfather was kind of like, we're going to do Christmas now, but there's mythic stuff. And Thief of Time was like, we're going to do quite a few different things, in fact. It's like, cool. Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to explain why my world doesn't quite work as well.
Also that, it's like, does it seem anachronistic? Well, you may say that, but it's fine. In some respects, it's never clear how long it is between Mort and, because obviously Reefman happens, and then there's soul music, but obviously Susan has to have been born and grown up in that time.
People have done timelines.
I'm sure they have. They've done maps.
They've done timelines before Thief of Time and to work, and it was showing that it didn't work. And then I think he just wrote Thief of Time to basically said
it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. The reason it's
Lanca's 21 years out, so yeah, something like that.
So yes. Yeah. No, as part of the could you read this sequence out without reading any of the others?
I think so, yeah.
Some of the sort of subbing, the wizards, I suppose they turn up enough that you could get a reasonable idea.
I suppose.
None of the characters.
Obviously, Mort explains is the direct sequel of soul music. I think if you didn't read Reaper Man, it'd kind of be that does explain the auditors, and they do show up a fair bit later. I don't think they're in soul music, but then the other two. Or later too.
I'm just saying, could you just get away with reading the 5 books?
I think you could read those 5. It'd be a good thing. It features the wizards, and like Nanny Ogg's in Thief of Time.
I think you'd lose some of the references, but I think you'd be able to get away with.
But because the whole point. Thief of Time, they're kind of outside of history. There's a whole new bit that you haven't seen before. Soul music and Hogfather have Ankh-Morpork in it quite a bit, so you've got the bits and pieces of Ankh-Morpork, but it's like, one's about music, one's about Christmas, you sort of know what that is. Roofman's out in the countryside somewhere, but it isn't like the flat bit of the countryside. Is it the plains or something?
Stow-Elite.
Oh, okay. Oh, is it actually Stow-Elite?
Oh, no. Just that there is the plains of Stow-Elite, but I'm not sure if you
I think that's a joke, and I think it's something in Polish, but I don't know enough about it to know.
I don't think at this point he'd got enough of a map.
No, that's fair enough. But so I think it does work as its own thing, definitely. And the cast expands a bit, like Death's household. So you've got Albert and Death of Rats and Binky and the Raven, but in some respects a lot of those are animals. So it's kind of more, I think after Reaper Man, it becomes more about other characters that are in it for that book.
Well, I have, obviously I said this was the one I started with, so Reaper Man, for those who can't read the back of the video. But I also recently, last year now, end of last year, colleague was wanting to read, she was reading all the books in the 100 novels that shaped the world list the BBC had, and the Discworld series was on there, so she wanted to read a Discworld novel. But obviously, not the whole series.
Because that'd be like 41 of them.
Yeah,
at least.
So she asked which ones, and I she read Reaper Man. I gave her Reaper Man, Guards, and
which ones?
The first which one? So Weird Sisters.
As is not what is Equal Rights the first witch one?
No,
we'll have to discuss that when we do witches.
That's an argument for another day.
Yeah.
And she was, I think she was quite hesitant, but she sat and read it, and she started reading it in the staff room, was laughing in the corner. So
that's what happens to Terry Pratchett stuff. You read it and you're just like giggling away to yourself.
My work was done in that case.
Yeah. I did try to get my sister to read one, but that didn't really work out. And she got me to read the Misery Memoir, and she was like, "Shall we?" I think she wanted me to read this Misery Memoir she was reading. She's like, "Shall we each recommend a book to each other we wouldn't normally read?" I was like, "Okay, fine. Do you want a Discworld one?" And she was like, "No."
That never works well.
I think I ended up giving Dana and Jones or something. I can't remember exactly, but yeah.
I did a similar thing with one of my ex-colleagues. At the point she ended up having to. It was a bit of a fit. She ended up having to read the first Harry Potter because her grandson got to the point. She wanted to read it. He wanted to read it. And she wanted to understand what was going on. So I said I would, if she read that, I would read a book she suggested. She gave me Philippa Gregory one. I tried. I really did try.
No, I read all of A Child Called It, and I can't remember which book I suggested to my sister. It wasn't. I suggested Terry Pratchett. Oh no, she immediately went for Eric because it's like this big, and I was like, no. And I think I didn't give her a Discworld one. I think I gave her another one. I can't say Dana and Jones because I was reading a lot of that at that point. I don't think she read it. I can't remember. She just wanted me to read a child abuse book for some reason.
I mean, to be fair, I did try, but I mean, even sitting there thinking that they were on an alien, trying to frame it as if they were on an alien planet, and it was
Is that not just the historical stuff?
It was just purely historical. For some reason, it just.
See, no, because obviously I like history, which is maybe one of the reasons I like Fifth Time, because the history stuff, it's a bit like, these things seem anachronistic. It's like, okay, interesting. But the thing I found with history stuff, particularly if you read like a lot, if you read a lot of fantasy, because there's a lot of historical fantasy, or fantasy that's in a historical-ish setting, is then if you read a regular history, you sort of have to change track a little bit. Because I did read one that a colleague recommended when I worked in libraries, and I was like, nothing's happened for a very long time. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, because there weren't actually sword fights all the time. A lot of it's more about like people stuff. And the one I read was very well done. I just was a bit like, why isn't this person solving their problem quicker? And it's like, a person at that time wouldn't have solved their problem in that way. That just happens in fantasy, or things a bit more swashbuckling.
To be fair, it was very well written. I'm sure very well researched. It was just that I think it was partly because there wasn't a lot happening.
Which one was it?
I want to say the Red Queen.
I can't remember what that's about. I'm not sure.
No. I think the other problem is, and I'm I think it was because they're all from the woman's perspective.
Yeah. Yes, if you read historical novels about women, they don't have a lot of agency. This was the issue I had with that one I read. You see, because in a fantasy book, people just dress as a boy and go and fight swords or invent feminism. That's not really how it works. And
it was just kind of like, there's not really much happening. She's kind of just been, I didn't enjoy it. But, I mean, I know a lot of people that do really enjoy them, so, Anyway, we have a question.
Oh, okay. I was going to say that there is a strength to writing characters that don't have agency in times when they wouldn't have done, but, like, showing the more intricacies.
Don't get me wrong, I'm sure it was a good book.
It's just not your genre.
Just not my cup of tea. Which is fair enough. Right, we have a question. What is our favourite across this whole series, not just the death subset?
Oh.
See, now you put us on the spot there.
Yeah, see, because I wouldn't say that the Death ones are my favourite series. I'd say it's between Guards and Witches. So then the favourite's probably between Guards and Witches, and that gets tricky. I feel like Fifth Elephant is a strong contender, but again, see,
really? I think I've already read that once.
Oh no, I've read that quite a bit. See, that there was a point at which I would just go to the bookshop every few weeks and I'd buy another Discworld book because there were tons of them. Once I started, I read Equal Rights and I wasn't sure, and I read a couple of them, and then I kind of really got into it. I think obviously more, not that I was reading them in order at first. So like the Guards ones are a little bit out of order, but there was a point where I just reread them really regularly because I was rereading stuff more. And so Fifth Elephant is one that I read quite a bit at that point. I do quite like Fifth Elephant. Which is one that's tricky because they're all really good too, like in a different way. Same author, but yeah. So I'm not sure which one of the Witches ones is my favourite because they all have like bits I like from a lot of them. See, the main one I've not read as much for, which I think is Masquerades. But like Lords and Ladies, I read a lot, and I like that one. But I do also quite like Carpe Jugulum as well. Yeah, it's tricky. Probably one of those I just... Tell you what, when we do those series, we'll narrow it down then, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. Not entirely sure either.
Can you narrow it down to a sub-series and then pick some of your favourites from that, like I just did?
I mean, I've got a soft spot for some of them.
Yeah,
more than others.
I think there's some that you've like read once and like, oh, this was fine. Although I'm aware that a lot of them I read when I was like 14 to 17, and then I would reread them and got a few more of the jokes. But some of them I read quite a lot between the ages of 14 and 17. So
I've got a soft spot for Pyramids.
Oh, see, that's one of the ones I read once. I was like, oh, okay, sure.
But I think it was just when I was reading it, I was very much into Egyptology and Egypt mythology, and that, as it kind of played into what my interest at the time. Obviously, I think Thief of Time and Hogfather are definitely up there for me.
I mean, those are high for me. I'm just thinking because I slightly prefer the other series, so just trying to narrow it down, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it would end up being one of the earlier ones, possibly nothing too beyond Thief of Time. I would have to have a look at the whole list.
I just
later ones, while enjoyable,
Night Watch. Yeah, it's kind of between Fifth Elephant. I do like the film The Fifth Element. That's an entirely different thing. Probably Fifth Elephant, Night Watch, Lords and Ladies, and Carpe Jugulum. So again, kind of some of the slightly more middly ones of the those series, but kind of like middle to late, I think. Because I'm not as into the early stuff, I think, but yeah.
No, but I enjoyed all of them. I mean, another one thrown awkward for Swahili was We Free Men. I also enjoyed a lot.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah,
which is the Tiffany Aiken series. What did Mel say?
It's kind of a sub-series within a sub-series, that, isn't it?
That is, yeah. Tough choice speaking between Witches Abroad and Feet of Clay.
Oh, I do like Feet of Clay as well, yeah.
I'm not sure whether either of them are best, but they certainly are my favourites. Both of those are good ones as well.
I think Fifth Elephant just kind of pips out Feet of Clay for me, although Feet of Clay was one of the ones I read quite a lot. But yeah, I suppose Feet of Clay has less veterinary. No, not Feet of Clay. Sorry, Feet of Clay. I mean, Fifth Elephant has less veterinary. But like, I went for a phase where I quite like werewolf stuff as well. So like, Fifth Elephant's quite. Although they're kind of the bad guys.
Yeah, I think this is the thing. There are strong books throughout, and I think everyone, most people can find some books they like within the sequence, even if they don't necessarily like all of them. Because some characters are gonna.
I quite often find actually when people just post like, like a snippet like the Vine's Boot Theory, or like somebody was posting bits of interesting times, or various bits and pieces, and there's a snippet of it, and they'll be posting it to like make up like, here's a point about like how things are and how systems are a bit rubbish and how people can be a bit rubbish but also can be good, but like stuff like that. And it won't always be from the book you think it is, because they're just kind of in there peppered throughout, and you're like, oh, I really agree, that's really good, and I'm like, should I read this entire book again? I'd forgotten this little bit was in here, but like it's the whole of Pratchett is like that.
Yeah, I think it's the way he handles some things. I mean, we're kind of veering into general Pratchett talk now. But,
sure.
I mean, Man or May does.
Okay.
I mean, the Clacks, I think was was interesting.
Well, then you go into Going Postal.
But I think that how he introduced them, sort of how they were doing it was interesting. But also how that feeds into the real world.
The implications.
Well, no, actually, it's just the on some WordPress sites. In fact,
GNU.
You can actually put a thing in the background. Basically, it's about
GNU Terry Pratchett.
People being remembered. If someone says their name, they will always
travel through the clacks.
They'll always be remembered. So in the Discworld, they were bouncing names through the clack system. So there is the WordPress. In WordPress, you can do the same thing. In the background in the code. Lots of sites you can put Terry Pratchett. You can
GNU Terry Pratchett,
and make it come out.
Again, watching the videos where somebody's reading through the Pratchett book, he'd heard people say and write GNU Terry Pratchett and it was about, and then he read that and it's like, but that was after Pratchett died, and it's like, oh, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That's the thing. The Pratchett books are known to be inventive and funny, but they also have really strong emotional resonance, which I guess we've not talked about quite so much. Perhaps some of them more than others. But I think there's usually something a bit. Yeah.
These ones that deal with more of the metaphysics. It's more of the big things.
Yeah.
Possibly a little less than the. I mean, possibly.
I think Hogfather. Okay.
Mort possibly because it's dealing with a bit more of people. Yeah, Hogfather, I suppose.
Hogfather, I'd say, because if you think about what happens in the place that death can't go,
yes, true,
and what that represents,
yeah,
you know, and what happens to the sort of bad guy characters.
Yes.
Apart from the one really bad guy character who again was played by Mark Warren in one of his many forms of being utterly menacing on television.
Yeah. So yes, as we said, lots of good things to pick up. Yeah. Lots of.
Well, it's fun to talk about.
Yes. Right, how far did you get on your cow?
So here's the cow. I've removed most of the pins. So I've done all along the cow's back and round her face, and then I'm kind of like partway down one of the legs. So that's kind of like from there to there. So that's a reasonable bit of progress.
I haven't got as far as with the
with the legs.
Yeah, I'm having
I've managed to do like 1 and a bit cow legs already.
Yeah, I'm having problems fitting it together. If you see my if you watch my face while I was doing this, it's
I did
not
lose a needle at one point.
It's not going together smoothly. I think there is a bit of flash or sprue somewhere. I haven't cleaned something, so it's not fitting together. So I haven't quite got the leg finished, but I did start the waist unit, which is there. Highly exciting because that's it's the internal structure. Yeah, so it doesn't look particularly interesting at the moment, but you kind of need it to do all the wiggly bits.
Stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
So there we go.
Like a pelvis or a skeleton.
It is pretty much a pelvis on a skeleton.
Skeleton.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you for sticking with that ramble.
Yes. It was a little bit more organised this time. I need to
doing
use my
our best.
notebook more.
We are learning. We are learning every time how to improve.
I was organised at first. It's just then work got incredibly busy.
Yeah. So yes, we'll definitely be more organised going forward.
Not that we've decided what we're doing next week.
I mean, not that we're that organised, but you know.
Well, that's just something we decide as the week goes on.
I think it's how it takes us. You know.
Yes. And so thank you for watching, and we will put these on YouTube, which again we've gotten a little behind with, but I think 2
more have been posted.
Oh, have they? I thought you said you had.
Oh no, we haven't finished the.
No, you haven't finished the. You were going to show me how to log on and do that.
So
and then I can help.
It's because I want more information in the descriptions than just me typing.
I'm more the word person, aren't I?
Well, it's more I need to remember what we were doing, what we said, what we talked about. Like books.
If we do each one after we've done this, it'll be easier to remember.
It will be. I'm nearly there. I'm getting there. I'm catching up. So
anyway, so yes, thank you for watching. Whichever format you've watched it, and yes, I guess if you're watching on YouTube, do the YouTubey things, and you can leave a comment there too. You get notified about that, don't you?
Yeah.
There you go.
If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications when we put a new video up. I believe that's what we're supposed to say.
I don't know. You're the YouTube person.
That's what they seem to say.
All right.
Yeah, and please do comment either in YouTube or if you're on Facebook if you're watching this after the fact. Please do feel free to comment. We should go back and catch the comments because we only get the ones we can see on the screen.
Okay, cool. Well, yes. So stay safe, everyone.
Yes.
And goodbye.
Bye. I can see the button today.
Good.